Here's the outstanding mortgages by interest rate. And you can see that people have very, very low rate, very comfortable mortgages. However, there is something interesting about this. Remember those 4 million people a year for the last 3 years that have been buying houses? Well, they have higher interest rates. And so interestingly, and if you're looking at the chart with me, I got to try to always explain things for audio only listeners because, well, that's most of our listeners. And I love you. Keep listening on audio only. I love the portable format. It's great. But if you have a chance, grab these YouTube videos and just so you can see the charts. So here you see the pandemic era, right? And during the COVID era, we had very few mortgages that were 6% or above. But that number has actually increased to now where we have about 20% of the mortgages that are 6% or higher. So that's interesting. Why did that happen? Well, because 12 million people bought a house since the rates went up, give or take. It's not an exact number, back of the napkin math, okay? But that is actually, interestingly, a positive sign because those people were underwritten in more harsh circumstances than the low rate people were underwritten. The low rate people, they only had to qualify for a very low payment. So you see how that works? I just want to encourage everybody to try things and to do more things. And I saw this Babe Ruth quote and I thought it was great. Every strike brings me closer to the next home run. And that's how life is. It's number one, on the job training. We got to just go out, take risk, make things happen, and just understand that every time we fail, as long as we're failing forward, we are getting closer to the success we seek. I remember when I was a traditional realtor, a very young one, I remember listening to a sales trainer by the name of Jerry Bresser. He was a good sales trainer, very old school guy. I had his cassette tapes. And he would talk about how you should stack $25 bills on your desk, right? And every time you make a cold call and someone hangs up on you or, rejects you in some way, move it to another pile. Have these two piles of the $5, right? Because you got closer and closer to success the more you failed along the way. And that's the way it is with everything in life, right? We got to just keep trying. We got to be optimistic and we've got to just keep doing things and keep moving forward. The only people who ever really lose are the people who don't move forward, the people who don't try, who don't, just take the risk to get into things. And you'll never figure everything out before you start. That's just not the way life works. And people, I sometimes see them, they think about, should I invest in real estate or, not? I don't know. I don't know everything. What if this happens? What if that happens? Yeah, it's probably going to happen. Okay, all the this and the that are going to happen to you eventually if you do enough things. But you got to just take more swings, right? And that's the way you get success. I've told you my story before, but I bought my first rental property when I was 20 years old. I lived at home, okay? I did not have a place of my own, but I owned a rental property. And in this first rental property, I put a tenant in there and it was going well for a while. And then the tenant just stopped paying. I would go knock on the door and I would try to collect the rent. And I was a kid, right? And they didn't respect me at all. And so they just stopped paying the rent and I had to evict these people. And that was my first experience. Do you think I would have had every reason to just give up and say, hey, this real estate thing doesn't work? Nobody would have blamed me. They would have just said, I get it, Nobody looking around, none of my friends would have blamed me for just giving up. But I'm sure glad I didn't because I made many, many millions and millions of dollars since then. And that's why you got to keep going, even in the face of discouragement. Okay, let's just look at this real quickly. In the conversation about Trump tariffs and the Hartman risk evaluator, which I've been teaching for 21 years, which is based on the very reliable price of construction materials that, they have intrinsic value. They're not attached to any one currency. Every human needs them because they all need shelter and they are traded globally, right? So we look at those materials and I always talk about being a packaged commodities investor, investing for the commodity value almost as much as for the real estate value. And with that thinking, this is an interesting visual that I got that shows the breakdown. Okay. So the average total construction cost is $428,000. The finished lot cost in this average example, $91,000, including the financing cost. So keep in mind, the builder didn't pay that for the lot, but they had to carry that lot for probably 2 to 3 years, and they had to finish all of the utilities to bring them up to the curb, right? So that represented, in this case, 13%. I'm just going to round off for speed here, 13%. Financing cost, another $10,000, 1.5%. And that doesn't include the financing cost of the lot, because that's separate, because it takes much longer to finance the lot, to get it entitled, to do construction, all of that kind of stuff, right? Overhead and general expenses, $38,000 or 5.7%. Marketing, $5,600 or 0.8%. Sales commission, $19,000 or 2.8%. Profit, $73,000 or 11%. Now that's in a very good market. Builders don't always get that kind of profit, okay? But think about the impact of this house that is sold for $665,000, okay? Remember, $428,000 was the builder's construction cost. That's not the sales price, okay? It's sold for $665,000. It's 2,600 square feet is the average square footage. And you've got the whole breakdown. And think of the impact of tariffs and increasing labor costs. By the way, you know what? They just baked the labor cost into all of these numbers, I guess, because there's no line item for labor cost, okay? And imagine 13 to 20% of these laborers being deported because they're here illegally, and that's about the estimate. And imagine the cost of these inputs increasing, right? What does that do to the price of housing? Even the price of resale housing goes up because all of those new houses sell for more. The pull on the prices of the resale houses go up as well. So it's just an amazing, interesting way to look at the market and an amazingly interesting time in the market. And the experts say that the housing shortage will be with us until 2032. And they estimate we are anywhere between 1.5 and 8 million homes short. So my recommendation to you as an investor is be part of the solution. Be part of the group that is supplying housing to people. It's the most historically proven asset class in the entire world. It's the most tax-favored asset class in America because the government needs you to help solve this problem. They need you to provide the housing. So do what they want. It's good advice. They're going to reward you for it, okay? The most tax-favored asset class in America.